On Monday, we saw the Chargers beat the Broncos on Monday Night Football 19-16. And like we do every single week, we're going to be going through the things that we learned about this Chargers team based on this week's game. So if that's something that you enjoy, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. But let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and get right into this. The 5 things that we learned about the Chargers from this week's matchup against the Broncos. So first things first, incredible game. If you want to see my quick reactions, my instant reactions that occurred immediately after the game, go and check that out. That video was uploaded literally the night of Monday, but this is going to be the more in-depth look into what the game looks like. So let's go ahead and get into it directly. The first topic I want to talk about here is going to be the fact that the Chargers were a lot better as a team than the score might have actually shown. Even though the Chargers would only win the game by 3 points, they would actually dominate on many levels when you're actually looking into some of the statistics that surround this game. The Chargers had nearly double the first down totals that the Broncos did, having 24 first downs to the Chargers, and the Broncos only had 13 first downs. They also averaged 50% on third down conversion rate, which is also about 10% higher than what they have averaged all year long. They had possession of the ball for 10 minutes more than the Broncos had, nearly I think it was 38-minute, 40-minute to 28-30, which, honestly is a huge gap. And I know a lot of that did come in the second quarter where the Chargers played extremely well and held the ball for the most part. I think the Broncos only had 2 possessions, and one of those possessions was with like a minute left. So a lot of that time did come in the second quarter, but time of possession is a big factor in who wins the game for the most part. They also forced 7 punts to only 4 of their own, and a 0 turnover difference, with the Chargers throwing 1 interception, and with the Broncos having that fumble on a muffed punt, however you want to refer to that. And the Chargers also had more passing yards, more total yards, played more plays, had a better fourth down efficiency, and had 1 less penalty and less total penalty yards. It's a lot of individual small statistics that the Chargers truly dominated in, and for them to win by 3 points just shows that as a whole their game was doing really well, but they just weren't able to punch it in for the goal. And if that game would occur in similar fashion over and over again, it's more likely than not that the Chargers would continue to win, if not win by more points, if that same scenario were to go over and over. With all the little details that the team was able to come up with and win the game, the stats do show the Chargers should have been able to put the game away much earlier in the game and potentially not went to overtime based on the stats, but as we all know, stats aren't actual reality. Next thing I want to talk about here is going to be the defense making some significant adjustments in the second half. Early on, the Chargers looked like they were going to have a really tough game after allowing 2 back-to-back big plays that would lead to a touchdown on blown coverage by J.C. Jackson that led to a big touchdown to, I believe, was their tight end. And after allowing 10 points in the first quarter, the team did a really great job at changing some things up to try and get it going, and they would hold the Broncos to only 3 points in that second quarter, which came on the last possession for the Broncos. Now, entering that second half, the Broncos were up 13-10 and really didn't have a lot going for them in that second quarter, but entering that second half, the Chargers made some huge adjustments, which would limit to the Broncos to only 3 points for the remaining 3 quarters due to the overtime adding another quarter. And, a big factor in that, which was kind of a surprising call and an aggressive call from Brandon Staley, is J.C. Jackson, cornerback 1, who was just paid a ton of money by the Chargers, was moved to the bench with Michael Davis filling in for his spot. Huge move, huge risk factor, but Brandon Staley made that risk, and it did make a huge development in how well the Chargers did play in that second half. And, the Chargers didn't do a splendid job defensively in that first quarter by any means, but the fact that they were able to turn it around and get it working in that second half was definitely, a good thing to see, raise the hopes a little bit more, give some more confidence in the coaching staff to show that they're not just going to let it ride. And, that game could have turned into a completely different game and JC Jackson stays in and that defense plays how it did in that first quarter. But they make adjustments and they make it figured it out and make it work. And, it leads to the Broncos having 6 points through the remaining 4 quarters of the game if you include overtime. So very good to see. And, with multiple 3-and-outs that they did force in that fourth down, especially in overtime, with some big plays, it really showed that the team as a whole, not only the coaching staff to make those smart decisions, but the team as a whole was there together and they knew that they could make those stops. We saw Drew Tranquill with a huge sack on 3rd and 6, as well as a different sack in a different scenario. And Asante Samuel Jr. came up with a big pass breakup that was going to Jerry Jeudy late in the game as well. In total, the Chargers held the Broncos to 4 of 14 on fourth down, shutting down many drives very early. A ton of props to the Chargers defense. Now, another thing I want to talk about here is going to be the Chargers special teams and the fact that, people say defense wins championships, but, maybe special teams wins championships with how great the special teams was playing yesterday. Special teams had a huge impact on the game on so many different aspects. Early, we saw Dustin Hopkins on his first kick attempt on a 35-yarder. He put it through, but it looked like he injured his hamstring. And he would stay on the sideline for most of the game wearing a leg brace. And it looked like he wasn't quite ready and fully healthy. And actually, as a matter of fact, he's expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks due to that hamstring injury now. But instead, he marches back out, he hits a 31-yarder. He marches back out, he hits a 37-yarder. And after an incredible play on special teams, once again, by Jasir Taylor, who rushes down, pushes the blocker on the punt return of the opposing return team, we see Jasir Taylor push him into the return man who muffs the punt. Chargers get the ball from the Broncos on that fumble, and Dustin Hopkins, just 4 plays later, puts it through the uprights on a 39-yarder to seal the game for the Chargers in overtime. All around a really, really good performance from special teams, and although there was no huge returns for the Chargers themselves, they did a great job overall to keep them in the game. We know how often and how inconsistent a special teams can truly bring down a great team. We've seen it with the Chargers. I think it was 2011 was the year or somewhere around that time frame when Chargers had number 1 offense, number 1 defense, and the worst special teams and missed the playoffs. So it was very good to see that the special teams did come up big for the Chargers in this game when they needed it most. Now, the fourth topic I want to talk about here is Russell Wilson really had nowhere to go. Although the Broncos certainly weren't a good offense by any means entering this game, the Chargers defense still played great and does deserve its fair credit. With an excellent wide receiver duo in Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, who many people were truly worried about, myself included, the Chargers ended up holding them to 5 total receptions for 68 yards combined. That's very, very good stats for both those guys who averaged over that 70-yard by themselves. To hold both of them to that number together is very, very good sight to see for the Chargers. Now, Russ started the game 10 for 10, as mentioned earlier, before he completely seemed to get shut down later in the game. In the final 3 quarters, including overtime, Russ went 5 for 18, which is not good by any means. And not only were the Chargers defenders knocking down passes all over, but Russ was also missing some of his open shots, underthrowing his men, overthrowing his men at times, and just wasn't putting the ball in a position where the wide receivers could come down with it. And when it was put in a good spot, the Chargers were able to bat it down themselves. So Russ, whether it's him still performing at a bad level or the Chargers defense playing at a great level this game, Russ really just had nowhere to go. And finally, what I want to talk about here, and probably the longest list here, is going to be the flags. And there was just too many flags. It really felt like every other play there was a flag being thrown. Constantly. In total, there were 19 flags, 9 for the Chargers and 10 for the Broncos, with a total of 240 yards total. The Broncos are a team that does struggle immensely with that flag department, averaging 9 per game and just being one over that. But the Chargers, on the other hand, averaged 5.7 and had 9. So they were certainly well above that. Not only that, but yesterday was the most penalized game of the season for the most yards by far. By far. The good news, though, was there was truly only about 1 or 2 terrible flags that really shouldn't have been called, as mentioned by the penalty analysis that comes on with the commentators, and he talks about the flags and why it was called, if it should have been called, and all that stuff. There's only 2 of those that he kind of questioned. The only real problem that I had with some of these flags was some of the inconsistency throughout. Now, I know some Broncos fans were saying that there was too many pass interference calls, but when you truly look at it, there were fair calls. And as a matter of fact, there were some plays where they wouldn't call it because just a few plays prior there was a pass interference, and they didn't want to throw so many on the same drive. But the biggest thing here is kind of a factor that's going around the entire NFL, and that is the fact that, roughing the passer is super inconsistent. We saw a play where Russ, got safely tackled, and it was pretty soft, but roughing the passer was called, which was, kind of a surprise there. There was a time where one was called on Herbert as well, and at first it looked like it shouldn't have been, but when you looked at it and based on the rules, it should have been, because he initiated, jumped off his feet, and made contact with the head with his helmet. Even if it was light, that's what the rules say. But there was other times where both Russ and Herbert were getting drilled. I mean, absolutely drilled, both sides. And I do see Herbert's more than I'm going to see Russ, because Herbert is my quarterback and Russ isn't. But there was definitely times on both sides of the ball where it felt like a quarterback got hit, and in other situations that would have been called roughing the passer, but it wasn't in this game. I just wish it was a little bit more consistent. But, in total, that's kind of the 5 things we learned. Not a whole lot to cover here, as the game was just, really, really simple. There was no huge things learned, no huge plays made. Nothing incredible that drastically changed the game, and not a whole lot that could be learned from such a game, as most of the things we kind of already knew and or expected. Now, one thing that I'm going to be doing, as always, I should have that film recaps video up either tomorrow or Friday, one of those 2 days, and then the Chargers preview for the Seahawks game on Friday or Saturday. But at some point, especially depending on how this game goes on Sunday, there might be a video on J.C. Jackson, and if it is time to finally worry about him. But if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And as always, I hope it touched up today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Something really important to me. Affects me most day in a great way, because every single day can be a great day if I'll just put in the effort. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.
But something deep inside